All right, that was the first.
That was the first part.
Danke, manchmal ist es so einfach.
Hi everybody, welcome to Tidalwave Afterwork, the podcast about music production. My name is Patrick Damiani, I'm the owner of Tidalwave Studio. This is my good friend and colleague Marc Maurer. We are both mix engineers. I do a lot of recording, he does a lot of production and songwriting. And we are here to share our experience with you guys. So we answer your questions and we also answer not asked questions. So let's dive into it.
Yes. I have a not asked question.
Okay, don't ask me.
Okay, I think if I remember correctly, you had a day off today or yesterday? Yesterday. Okay, so you had a break.
I had a break. Although I must admit that I was still thinking about stuff, but yeah, I had a break.
Because I wrote this down and I wanted to throw this at you.
Okay.
Because we always talk about these relations between music topics and stuff that's happening in personal life maybe, and there's an interesting concept I think in thinking about breaks and silence and having personal space in your life, and in music having pauses, having breaks in music, having contrast. And I would like to know your thoughts about, this correlation.
The first thing that comes to my mind is, if we speak about contrast, is what I really personally need after an intense working day is doing something completely different.
Yes.
For example, most of the time I cannot listen to music after I finished working. And my big passion is woodworking, and especially unplugged woodworking, which means like working with old hand planes and old saws and without power. So no machines running. It's a calming and down-to-earth thing about working wood with just your hands, like 300 years ago. So this is such a big contrast to being sitting at the computer all day and doing something with your hands. It is still creative, but so different that it's just cleaning up my gray cells as if I would just do nothing. Or something completely different, go to the gym or go to the sports, go climbing and just do something physical as opposed to just sitting my ass flat on a chair.
Yeah.
This is, if I wouldn't have these separations or these contrasts, I think I would go crazy. Although I really, really, really love my job, but if you're just doing one thing, it's like your favorite meal. If you're just fed with that one meal, then you will be overfed. You need contrast.
Yeah, totally.
What about you?
I just know for myself, I'm a very introverted person. I need a lot of time by myself or with my girlfriend, which to me is the same thing. It just means, encapsulated me place, and sometimes I see friends that kind of surround themselves with people all the time and they never get to rest. And I always have this feeling like there's not really time to digest what you're actually doing. And I think the correlation to music in that would be, I could give you an example. Like if you have a song that's like really, really heavy all the time, it's like, 100 miles an hour, like all the time. After like 2 minutes, it doesn't really feel heavy anymore.
If everything is loud, everything is quiet.
Exactly, yeah. And that's kind of the same thing. If you always live, you could adapt that to surrounding yourself with people or what you do. If you're doing sports all the time, it's not good. And you also don't want to sit just by yourself all the time. But the contrast is what
totally
makes everything worthwhile and exciting, because
spring is not so green. If there's no winter before.
Exactly. Yeah.
The thing with some people needing to have people around all the time or just enjoying it, maybe it's just a thing of type of people. Not everyone wants to reflect things. Not everyone wants to think about stuff. It's not everyone is philosophically thinking. I know you are very how would you say that? You like to think about all kinds of aspects of everything, and it also reflects on the artistry. Being a musician and an artist, I think that's maybe part of it. But I think many musicians or artists are people that think about a lot of things and incorporate a lot of things into their art. While as let's take my father as a prime example of a very straightforward man. He's retired now, but he worked his ass off every day, worked a lot, provided for his family, and is a very straightforward thinking. He's very intelligent, but he's not a big thinker in terms of philosophical things. He's not just not the type of guy to.
Yeah.
And there are many people who are not the kind of people to have deep conversations, and maybe those people don't need contrasts as much. They are happy with straightforward things. Although I must say that although I like contrast like this, I need fixed routines. Get up at the same time, eat the same breakfast every day.
Yeah.
I do many things are exactly the same all the time, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This is a contrast within contrasts.
Yeah, it is. And I also thought the same thing about me, because on one hand, like you said, I would say that in my personal life, but then also maybe just as a musician, as an artist, as a songwriter, I like to have this contrast because I think it's this people who are like sensitive and reflective. They are in search of something oftentimes, I think that's also a common thing with our artists, is like you want to keep improving, whatever that means to you, But I think if I wouldn't be the kind of person that lies in bed at night and being like, so what did I do today? How did I behave? How did I treat people? How did blah, blah, blah. If I wouldn't do this, at least for me, I could not improve. I need this feeling of getting up the next day and be like, I'm going to do it even better. And the same thing about is with for maybe songwriting. You're writing a song, and then afterwards you reflect on it. I don't like start the next song right after one I wrote. I like to digest it a little bit and then be like, what if I try? But these kind of like what if I try moments only happen if I reflect. They don't happen when I'm in the zone, Yeah. So I guess that's probably like I said, it's very much a what kind of person are you thing. But
or maybe it boils down to staying curiosity is a big thing. If you are a curious person, like scientific people who are curious just about how does the world work, and you are not satisfied by being as smart or dumb in the evening than you were in the morning. This is, I think that's really a type of people that just love to know something, even if it's not important, something more in the evening than they knew in the morning. Yeah, and this is like a machine that it is fueled by curiosity and by reflection and by absorption, and then there are it's like in audio you have people that absorb and you have people that reflect. This is absolutely a thing, because I guess we all know people that just they are in their bubble, they feel safe and comfortable, and if something is thrown at them, it's just reflected. Be that an opinion, be that an argument or an idea or something, they just don't want to hear it, and they just reflect or deflect. Deflect it. What do we pull out of this?
I don't really know.
If you work in a creative environment, it is definitely of advantage to at least be open and porous to influence, because otherwise you just boil in your own sauce all day, and you don't evolve. It's you need input, and you need to digest and process everything that's coming in to evolve, and if you are constantly boiling stuff in your head, you need the breaks to cool down a little bit in between. Otherwise you just explode at some point.
And like we said, like reflect and digest all the inputs that you got, and then
And also
create something new out of that with, new intention, new thoughts about stuff, because you absorb things that get thrown at you.
may I use another analogy? It's
Go
like
for it. I love it.
It's like the real digestion system.
Oh, yeah.
You get food in, pulling out the vitamins and all the good stuff.
Yeah, and the
and
crap.
And the crap just
Leaves.
just goes out, takes a different path.
Yeah, yeah, that's well put.
And but what you keep in just lets you grow and stay alive.
Yeah, and evolve. Great.
What a good analogy.
I love this.
Okay,
Awesome.
let's digest some questions.
Yes. Okay. All right. We have a question from Dylan Peters. Hey, Dylan. Dylan wants to know, bus processing, compression, limiting, or both?
Bus processing. Well, compression or limiting or both. I would say I have a lot of everything on the mixbuss. Limiting maybe not so much, because you don't want to shave it off too much, but I have at least 3 or 4 compressors on the mixbuss always. Everyone doing a tiny little bit. Limiting at the very end, just like as a safety net. How many compressors do you have? Do you have more or less compressors?
I usually have 2.
Which ones? Do you use the same? Or why do you have 2, and what do they differently one from each other?
One only ducks the snare. So it's not about like coloration or anything. I usually just use the FabFilter one, and I high pass the sidechain. And I really want to have the snare to be too loud, and then having the compressor react almost only to the snare. Sometimes I even sidechain it to the snare, which people have called me crazy for, but it works for me.
At the end, if it's what you wanted to do.
Yeah. And then I have something that just could be whatever.
I do exactly this with a clipper.
Yeah.
Standard clip, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And I dial it in so that it catches
just the peaks, like
just the very, very, because this is like if you don't do this, either the limiter later will somewhat eat away the punch from the snare. The limiter is too strict; it's going to eat the punch. Maybe the compression works well. If you haven't done it, try that with a clipper also. It's really, really great, because it just shaves off that little bit too much spike.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing with the compression.
Yeah.
So that afterwards the limiter or the next compressor is not going to react too heavily, right?
Yeah. I mean, the way I use it is basically I want the snare to be a little bit too loud before that compressor.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, on the snare it could be like, I would say like maybe 4 dB or something.
On the
something.
master, yeah.
Like on that compressor. But it's the fastest attack and a very pretty fast release. So it's like
You're only catching the peak.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's just a sound. If I don't have this on there, I really have trouble to make a mix feel right for me.
Yeah.
And then afterwards I don't have that spike, so then I do whatever, and then I have a limiter at the end. And the limiter is more for me to, if I know that it gets mastered externally, I can decide to either send the mix like this to the customer so they get an idea of how it's gonna be like loud. And then if I send it to mastering, it depends on the mastering engineer. I would just ask, hey, should I put the limiter off? Should I go a little bit less? Should I
both?
Do you want both? But most of the time so far, everybody was like, yeah, it's fine with the limiter. So it's not like crazy limiting.
Yeah, I usually send both, like the client reference mix, as you call it. So you have to send out competitively loud mixes because they are going to compare.
Yes.
And if, and then for mastering, I just dial back a little bit the last limiter.
Yeah.
I don't remove it maybe completely, but because the mix behaves the way it does because every stuff is on.
Yeah.
So this is maybe a general good practice if you are working into compression and limiting, and I would really recommend doing this.
Yeah.
Your mixes are going to be much louder. They're going to build up density all by themselves. Everything is allowed. Put on whatever you need to make it go, and put it right away. You can still dial it back a little bit if it's too much, or put more. But if you, put it on, put as much as you want, and put it there right away.
Yes.
Thank you. It was a great question.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. All right, we're happy to announce a new special practical part of the podcast because I think 7 episodes into this podcast.
8.
Now 8 now.
8.
8 now. Woo! 8 now. Okay. So even just 8 episodes into this podcast, we get so many questions about practical stuff or stuff that we could actually show. And we already started to show some practical stuff, but a lot of those topics is like, how do you record this? How do you write a song? How do you mix it? How do you mix this specific instrument? So we thought, why not bring this all together into like a masterclass mini version where we basically, we wrote a song, a mini song, but it's enough.
Can we even call this a song? I think
so. Yeah, it's a song. It's a mini song, and it's a mini masterclass. But we will cover in this masterclass everything from start to finish, from the demo and writing the song, recording all the instruments with all the important aspects that you need to know, also the mixing part, and you will get to see the whole thing in a mini version. And we're happy to start this series today and bring you the first part, which is
the drums.
Like just staring at me, I'm trying so hard to make sense of this. Tidal waves, all of my thoughts are washed away again.
All right, let's have a look at the drum set we used for this recording, as well as all the microphones, how we position them, and why. Let's go. The drum setup is very, very basic. We just put what is absolutely needed for this track, which means that there are no toms that are not played, no cymbals that are not played, which makes setting up microphones much easier, as if you would have to squeeze in microphones in between of 10,000 toms or cymbals. So what we are using is a 22-inch bass drum, 16-inch floor tom, 14-inch snare, 2 cymbals and a hi-hat, and that's about it. Let's go through the individual elements and see how they are tuned and what we did to them to let them sound the way they do. Alright, let's start with the overhead microphones. By selecting the kind of microphones you use and the placement you use, you define a little bit the overall aesthetics of your drum recording. In this case, we are going for a bright, cymbal-focused sound. So we have 2 small diaphragm condensers pointing directly at each crash to capture mostly the cymbals and as little general kit as possible. The bass drum is tuned as low as we could and recorded with 2 microphones. There is one dynamic microphone inside, which captures more of the attack and the mid-range of the kick. And then we have a do-it-yourself sub-kick kind of microphone, which is basically a speaker wired in a way that it works like a dynamic microphone, and it captures the oomph of the kick drum. Let's have a look at the snare and the microphones. We use a very basic steel snare, 14-inch, with a bottom head cranked up so that we get a good response from the wires, and the top head tuned pretty low to get a rather rich and fat sound. I have another video that I made about snare tuning if you want to have a look at it. Dampening wise, there is not a lot going on. We just have this little piece of fabric that is basically just controlling the sustain of the ring of the snare a tiny bit. When you hit the snare, it's lifting off a little bit, so we have the full sound, and as soon as the hit is over, it's lowering down again and just controlling the sustain. That works amazingly well. We have two microphones on the snare, one dynamic microphone on the bottom pointing directly at the wires of the snare to get this nice crisp sound. The top microphone is, as you can see, at a pretty shallow angle. This is in order to get a lot of high end out of the snare microphone, because the shallower the angle, the more high end. The more perpendicular, the more bottom end, but the less high end. And we wanted as little bleed of the hi-hat into the snare microphone. That's why if we already have a crisp sound from the microphone, we don't need to crank high end and risk of getting more hi-hat into the microphone than we already have. And to prevent bleed even a little more, we have this little separator made of very heavy material that is just blocking off the hi-hat from the snare microphone, and that's working pretty well as well. The tom we used is a 16-inch tom, tuned as low as we could, with quite a bit of dampening. There are some moon gels, there's some tape stuffed on the resonant head, and there is this piece of leather that bounces up when you hit the tom and lowers down as soon as the hit is over to dampen the tom after the hit has been passing through completely. The microphone used is a dynamic microphone at a pretty perpendicular angle to the skin to get a lot of bottom end. On the hi-hat we have a good old SM57 pointing downwards towards the head, a little bit away from the set because we just want the hi-hat and not a lot of snare or anything else, and we are focusing on the mid-range of the hi-hat just to pull the hi-hat a little bit closer towards us in the mix. In order to get a very natural drum sound, you need some kind of room microphone that is capturing the whole kit from distance. My favorite way of doing it is using this guy. I made a complete video about this microphone construct and how I built it. It's basically emulating a human head standing in the room listening to whatever you put in front of it. And it's giving us a nice three-dimensional picture of the drums in this case. All right, two more microphones for this drum setup. One pair of ribbon microphones in the untreated lounge of the studio. We are outside the recording room. This is the door that we leave open so that some drum sound can spill out of the recording room into this untreated room. So basically this is now our echo chamber where we can pick up some diffuse and ambient drum sound to make the whole drum kit sound a little bit larger than if we just had the more dry tracks of inside the recording room.
But just staring at me, I'm trying so hard to make sense of this. Tidal waves, all of my thoughts are washed away again.
All right, that was the first part of our mini masterclass series. Talking about the drums. We'll continue this next episode with who knows what.
You will see. You have to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss what's coming next.
Yeah. All right. One last question, I guess.
Last question.
Have you ever heard of the so-called producer fader?
Yes. Yes. And I don't like it.
Okay, can you tell the people what that is?
No, I just tell that I don't like it. Yeah, sure. The producer fader is, it comes back from when you worked on analog console and the musician with who wanted to have a change that the producer didn't agree with, like, can you put up the bass? Yeah, sure. And then he was like touching the unused or unpatched fader and pretending to raise or make whatever change so that the musician thinks he got what he wanted, but the producer just pretended to, which I think is a complete dick move.
Yes.
It's a complete dick move. Yeah, sometimes we as audio engineers or producers, we don't always agree with what musicians request. But then wouldn't it be nicer to say, yeah, okay, we can try it. Maybe say, yeah, I wouldn't do it because of blah, blah, blah. Let's try it and maybe listen for this and that, what maybe will change in a suboptimal way if we do it. But in the end, it's a decision of the musician. It's their music. They are paying you to do the job.
Yep.
And if they want that lead guitar up, then for God's sake, just put it up.
Yeah.
Don't pretend to, or at least say, I wouldn't do it. I don't want to do it. At least be honest, because this is just like, it's lying straight into the face of the musician and like, yeah, sure. And I don't like this. Honesty and good communication, and just don't kick the ass of the trust that the artist is giving you for taking care of his music by just being a dick and pretending to do something when in fact you're not doing it. This whole thing reminds me of another situation that happens quite often. It's the musician is asking me, could you put up the vocal, or could you do this or that? When I'm working on something completely different, I hear what he was asking, but I finish with it. And then he says, yeah, that's already much better. And it's like, okay, he asked me to do something about the vocals, but in fact I was working on the bass or something. And then I think to myself, how am I going to react to this? Am I going to say, but I didn't actually do anything on the vocal, and let him sit there feeling stupid?
Yeah.
Most of the times I just do as if I haven't heard it, because I don't want to let the musician feel stupid because he thought the placebo effect is happening.
It's a really, really interesting point. I never thought of that. Because the question then would be like, in your own head, is it more important that the musician is happy in that moment? And do you want to take, because you didn't like actively do something bad to him, it was just like a happy accident?
Yeah. I let it be. I let it leave as a happy accident.
Yeah.
Because it's, what point is there to be, yeah, but I didn't actually touch it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do this, but I would also say, so you like this better. I just would say, cool, great. Or maybe just let it be. He's happy, I'm happy, everything is cool.
Yeah.
There is placebo effect, and I don't want to make fun of this, because everyone has had this tweaking the one compressor that was in bypass.
Yeah, sure.
And then like, you think that you hear something just by realizing how stupid you are, that you actually worked on a knob that was not even active. So it's easy to make fun of this, but it's so much nicer and for a good all-round mood to not make fun of this or not take advantage of.
Yeah, no, I think the only thing I would add is that it just depends on like, is there like bad intention or good intention? Because I played live enough that I'm pretty sure that I had it happen to me that I wanted, the front of house guy to turn something up or down in my monitors, and thinking he did it. And I never know, because I don't see it, if he really did. And that's also a thing. I don't trust myself and my ears enough, like you said, with the plugin that is in bypass, to be like, I maybe play my bass live and then be like, and then they're like, yeah, that's great. And he didn't do anything. If there's good intention, then it's the happy accident placebo effect. The bad thing is when it's like purposely bad intentional of like, yeah, screw you. Yeah. That's
what you always can do is, in case of doubt, where you think, I should not put it up, at least not a lot, but the artist wants it up, that you just go like with a tiny increment, because sometimes even 0.1 dB makes a difference.
Oh yeah.
Not a huge difference, but it makes a difference. And maybe sometimes it's just that tiny little bit that you don't really feel much of bad anything, but maybe the artist feels like a good changement, and then maybe this is the nicer or best compromise. You do something, but maybe not as much as the artist thought that you wanted. But don't pretend, and don't be an asshole by making fun of the people who pay your rent.
Yeah, just don't be a dick.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yes.
Talking about being nice, we would think that it would be really nice if you like this video. That helps us with the algorithm of YouTube and grow out of the 2-digit views of this video.
That would be cool.
That would be great, would be awesome. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a little comment, ask a question if you have one, and subscribe if you haven't already. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.